Hi, and welcome to another coding along session in JavaScript. My name is Mike, and I'm a teacher at Erasmus Hogeschool, Brussels. Today we're going to be making a very simple higher-lower game, but not in the usual way. We're going to make it using a promise. Now, this might be a bit overblown, but this is just to learn how a manually made promise works and how we go about with the reject and resolve. So on the right side here, we see the higher-lower game. I don't know which one it is. I'm going to refresh. So let's say 6. Go higher. It's a bit passive-aggressive. Apparently, still not correct. Maybe it's 20. Lower. And I think you know how we are going about this game, so you keep guessing until you got it. There are some expansions to this that you can automatically refresh, be a bit more like count your attempts, etc. But this is a very basic way of doing it. Now, I'm going to be closing this one, and I'm going to be opening our demo application. Now, this doesn't do anything normally. Nope. So what I have here, what do you need for starters? That is a basic HTML file, and then actually just create a form which has an ID so you can catch the submit event, a simple input field, and a button. So give those an ID. So I have the ID input and I have the ID guess button. There are some classes in here to make it like more fancy and not as ugly as basic HTML. So you can add whatever style you want to it. So once you're done with that, let's go to the JavaScript. In my promise.js, I already have my window on load function, and that means that I can normally see my console log loaded. So in my HTML, I have the file in the top, in the head, added. So here, console log loaded. I'm going to close the browser here so we have a bit more room to play with. And if I go to the console, I would see loaded here on the bottom. So that means everything is working and we can start with the exercise. Now, the first thing we need to do is to actually generate the number. So let's say we have a magic number. Let's equal it to 0. And the moment our project starts, we need to create our magic number. Generate number. And that's a function to start with. Let me check. The generate number function. I'm going to place that function below that so that it actually can be reused in another way. It can be in a separate file. So function generate number, and it's just going to return us a random number. So how do you get a random number? Well, I can assign it magic number. So we're going to take this global variable and actually use it. Or we can do it here. Let's make it magic number equals the return of this. So that way this function is completely separate from the rest of the code. So we're going to return, and we're going to use the math functions. So lots of stuff in here. The thing we are going to be using is random. Random generates a number between 0 and 1. Now 0 and 1, we want it between 0 and 20. So we're going to be doing times 21. So the math in this is if we generate 0.5 times 21, that would be, I think, 10 at least, or 10 and a half. And then we would floor that by actually making it one integer without mat.floor. Here you go. This is a very generic number. So now we can actually show that number if we want. Console log the magic number to test it out even before we continue. So As you can see, it's 15. If I refresh, it's 11, 11, 13, 18, 20, 26, 18. So random enough, of course, it works. This is generic. So let's get to the actual fun part and try to catch what the user is typing. Good. Now, to capture the event, of course, I'm gonna clean my code up a bit. We need to have an event listener on the form. So document.get element by ID. I think it's called, for me, my name is called search form. Just gonna double check for a second. Search form, yes. You could also do this by doing a simple input field and a button and then calling the click. There are multiple ways to do this, but we have learned by if you have forms in the standard JavaScript, so not in a framework, you use a form to be clean coding in that regard. So search form. Let me check. What do we do with that? We add an event listener, and we were going to listen to submit. And I'm going to add an event. Just gonna do it like this. Add an event, and of course event.prevent default, so that the moment we actually click it, it does not refresh my page anymore. Get element by ID is 0. Why is it 0? Document.get element by ID. Search form. Let me check. Okay, capital F. Always handy to have your console open, so as you can see, it's okay. And let's see. Nothing happens. When I click the guess, nothing happens as well. Is it even a button? Type button. Okay. Type submit. You could do, like, I can do a click on this button. I can do a submit. Whatever floats your boat. I don't really care. But now it works. I see the click. Okay. Now that we have the click, the next part would be to capture the data from the input field, and we would do that by, I will just capture the input value. Always use comments in your code. Again, this is a coding along, a bit more freeform. Might come across generate a new random number. While I'm coding this, I might come across new tips, and I'll just give them to you. Generate a new random number. Catch the form submit event, and then capture the input value. So we can make this smaller later on though. So let me check. Capture the input event. So let value equals document.getElementById. And I think I call it just simply input.value. So this should have my value. Perfect. And I think now we're ready to actually get on to the promise part of the application. So let's create a function that does all the comparison for us and works with a promise so that we can wait for it as well. Good. So now the new function is, let's create it also outside of the scope of the window on load. Let's create a function called compare number, because that's what we are going to be doing. Function compare number. Compare number. We're gonna be, of course, receiving a number, and we're gonna compare the number to the magic number here. All right. If you want it to be completely separate from the rest, you can do number 1, number 2, and then compare those two. We're just gonna be using the magic number here because we only have one use case for this. So compare number. Now, in any regular coding exercise, I would say if, let's start with the correct one. If the number equals the magic number, I could return a string. So let's start with that. We know this one. Congrats. All right, but now we need to return a promise. But for say that we want to access a database here that we don't know how long it's gonna take, and we need to be learning how to work with the promises. Let's just start with that. We will return a new promise. Return new, because a promise is an object, so we're gonna be generating a new promise object. And that promise has two things in it, namely resolve. The constructor requests a function. So function. And in that function, it asks for two parameters, the famous resolve and reject. Voilà. Now we are returning a promise. And as you can see here by the vaguely put code, that means that it is code written after a certain return statement. So this will not even be accessed. Now, how do we go about this promise? Because a promise itself is just an object. We will catch it later in the event here, or how we're going to call it. So a promise here, we're going to do our thing that the code needs to do, and that is comparing the number to the magic number. So let's place our if in there. Oops. XV, voila. Now, the difference here is we're going to be expanding this in a second. So if it's equal, we want to resolve it, as in the promise is successful, we don't have any issues, let's use resolve. If it fails, let's use reject. So how would we do this? If we are in a promise, we don't use return, we use resolve. So it is a callback function of some sorts. So in this case, I'm going to be using resolve, and of course this is a string. So I'm going to be placing the string. Now that we have our basic promise, we need to be able to catch it here. Okay, so let's say I'm going to be calling the function here, compare number, and I'm going to be passing along the value. All right, now for promises, we have what we call consumer functions. Consumer functions are functions that allow us to wait until the promise is done. So in this case, a consumer function, you might have guessed if you have looked at the theory, it's called the then. So when this is done, then we will catch that code. Then allows for two parameters, result, and let's do just the console log result if the result come back. And it has an error function. Those are just very basic. We will be finishing the exercise soon though, but error. So as you can see, compare number. When compare number is done, which depends on when the resolve function or the reject function is called, then either this function or this function is called. If resolve is called inside the function, then we will end up here in the result function. If we call reject here, we will end up in the error function. I can easily show this, the demo. Let's say error, and you can even add the thing that is passed along. And success. And then we will voila. Oh. Good. So now either if resolve is called, then we will try this here. Now we only have if the number is equals to the magic number. So for the beginning, I will console log the magic number so I can always guess right. Console log magic number so that we know at the beginning what the magic number is. So we know that it's 16. So now if I pick 16, success, congrats. So this one is printed out. Let's say that if we do reject here, not the correct number, just in all caps so we can see it clearly. So it's 20. When I guess 16 again, not the correct number, because this if statement is skipped, because of course the number that I typed in is not equal to the magic number, and it's gonna call this reject. Now watch if I place this above the reject. So 10. So in all logic that we've used up until now, if 10 equals to the magic number that I type in, it should give me the success. Not, because a promise, like I said in the theory, is only triggered or finished once. So the moment it comes around this reject, nothing else will be executed afterwards, and that is the value of your promise. All right, so now that we know the basics, again, if this is completely foreign to you, go back to the theory of promises and how they work inside and out. Let's try to finish this application and actually focus on filling out the compare number function so that all cases are solved. Good. So I'm going to remove this reject and I'm going to add in some else if stuff. We're going to copy paste it in because I have it prepared. Voila. So pause here for a second if you want. But the thing I'm going to be doing here is comparing the number with the magic number. So if the number is smaller than the magic number, we go reject because it's wrong. Go higher, you noob. You can choose your own text, of course. Else if the number is higher than the magic number, then we reject again because it's still false. Go lower, you fool. Else if the number equals to the magic number, then we call resolve and congrats, then it's done. So in this case, now you have finished your compare function. Let's make it a bit smaller here. Finish your compare function, which returns a promise. And then we can keep trying this. So let's see, we have 10. Go lower, you fool. Okay, let's try again in 4. Go lower again. Let's try to go with 1, since we know that it's 3. Go higher, you noob. Okay, I think we got the point. So if we go 3, congrats, you go champ. As you can see, this is great. We have worked with the promise. My game works. Now just to add the finishing touch and add a message on the bottom of the page. Good. So that means that these console logs will be replaced. I will create a function that will add a message. For those in the HTML, there is a div with ID messages where I will shoot that in. I'm going to create a small function called add message. This is just to finalize, of course. Add message. And I'm going to, the message itself, I'm going to call it M. And I am going to be document dot get element by ID. I think it's called messages dot inner HTML. All right, and then I'm going to equal that to an alert in Bootstrap. So I think I have it prepared here. So Bootstrap itself has some alerts, you know, the boxes here. I'm going to copy paste this and then try to enter that. So as you can see here, voila. And instead of this is a primary alert, we will be adding the message. Oh, M. Okay. Voila. Very easy. When the result comes in, I will add the message there. Add message. And I will pass along the result. Same for the error. And I think I am done now. I've somehow forgotten a bracket. Give me a second. The then needs to be gone as well. Okay. Now let's test that out. So 10 is the number. 3 would give me, oh, result is not defined. Is result not defined? Result in the promise on line 15. Oh, of course, result is error here because this is a different function. Silly me. Go lower, you fool. Go higher, you noob. Congrats, you go champ. All right, perfect. Our messaging system works. The only thing that I want to finalize now is to change the color depending on the result or the resolve. So let's try that now. For me, when I pass along the result, I can also pass along something else. Now, I'm a fan of objects. I'm a fan of multiple parameters. Let's say let's use the parameters here. This is a success. For me, an S is a success and an E is an error. Now that I know that, I can in add message add another parameter that will be filled in with S and E. So as you can see with the alerts, the red one is called danger. The class it is alert danger, and the green one is, I think, success. So now we can do something which is called a ternary expression, or a very shortened version of an if statement. So an example would be, so let's say we see here div class alert, and the alert primary has to only be there when the type is S, and the E only the danger only has to be there when the type is E. Now, how would we do that? First of all, clear this, and I'm going to be entering this. So now we can input an if statement in here. An if statement that can do some cool stuff. Now, let's, of course, for an if statement, we need to have our expression ready. So we can type it something in here. It needs an expression. Now, an if statement, a shortened version of an if statement is type if it equals to S, then if true, then I'm going to print alert success. If not, then I'm going to print alert danger. I think this will do. So this is a shortened if statement. You have the expression here. If true with a question mark, we do this. If false, we do this. So it will actually replace this whole expression with the text based on the if statement. You know what? Enough talking. Let's try that out. 19 is our magic number. So that means if we guess 2, it's red. Go higher. Okay, let's go higher. Let's go for 20. Guess, go lower. Again, new error, still red. And if we go for 19, we have that here. So that's great. We have our complete example here, our complete exercise. Of course, after you're done, type in some actual comments so it's clear for you what you have done. For example, in my case, I will remove the console log because I don't want the game to be spoiled. The rest is good for me. This is our finalized version of the promise exercise. I thank you for your attention, and I will see you in the next video.